Hey everyone, welcome back to Software Testing and Quality Talks by Venkat Ramakrishnan. Adam Dawson is a dynamic force with over 13 years of expertise in security engineering, offensive security, and red team operations with full stack hands on experience. From networking to application security and forking into MLSecOps, ADS has mastered a diverse range of domains, making waves in classic penetration testing. A self-motivated, inquisitive, and adept security red teamer, bug bounty researcher, and cybersecurity professional, ADS has led the OWASP LLM Application Security Project Core Working Group and is also now part of the MITRE AI Working Group, pushing the boundaries of AI security, MLSecOps. ADS uncovers new tactics, techniques, and threat vectors in an ever-evolving landscape. He excels in adversarial red teaming activities, leveraging machine learning concepts to refine his skills, and is particularly adept at breaking technology barriers through creative automation techniques. Hi, Eds. Welcome to the show. Thank you for accommodating time to appear in this podcast. So let's jump into the discussion. As a software tester, I believe that prevention is better than cure. And that's why I emphasize on secure by design when it comes to security. Now, red teaming plays a crucial role in finding issues as the software is being developed. Tell us a bit about red teaming's role here and how effective the effort is in preventing defects.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for having me, Venkat. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate the great content you put out there. So red teaming is something that should be of focus. It's something that should be important to the business, which incorporates both external and internal campaigns, as well as deriving like a diverse skill set of cross-functional teams. So when we talk about red teaming, we want to understand, we want to have done the preliminary prerequisites for this, things like architecture design, threat modeling, for us to then identify weaknesses. So then we can formalize and operationalize those red team like campaigns and such for us to be able to build scopes of what we're trying to red team, so to speak.
Okay. And would you like to elaborate a bit on the activities that are being done on the red team here?
So red teaming, when it comes to the software development lifecycle, so red teaming is obviously one way of us being able to identify and remediate vulnerabilities within the software development lifecycle. But in terms of red teaming campaigns, that could be anything from like an internal bug bash of a new feature, or it could be an external penetration test, or even external bug bounty. It obviously utilize a framework, such as something like the PTS, which is the pen testing standards framework, where there is a scope that is derived and is built, and from there we use our targets and we apply those red teaming principles. The idea of obviously red teaming itself is that we take away those lessons learned and be able to fortify our defenses before obviously things go into production, which is obviously a much worse scenario of finding these problems.
Okay, wonderful. And that brings to my thought a couple of more questions. One is how the software testing and quality folks can collaborate with the red teaming in helping the security happen. That's my first question. And the second question is about requirements, which I will come to later. So can you please go ahead and explain how the software testing team can help you out?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's I think the best way is to empower software teams. So if I'm talking as someone who's like primarily, in security engineering or offensive security, part of my role from vulnerability management is to facilitate the software testing community and every other engineer that's involved within the software development lifecycle. So like from my experiences, I found a lot of success in championing like a security champion or champions, which is, and could be a rotated cadence of someone who is dedicated from the engineering team to work and pair alongside a security engineer. So they have increased focus of it. So it's kind of like taking the stereotypical acronym of the terminology around shifting left, but meeting more towards in the middle. So it's actually like empowering those development teams by providing them understanding, equipping them with the tools and capabilities, and giving them reason as to why we're introducing steps in the SDLC, and also continuous feedback loop, right? We want to make sure from a security perspective that we're not causing false positives, we're not actually causing additional areas of concern. So that kind of continuous feedback loop between cross-functional teams is definitely, in my opinion, the best way to go. Yeah.
Okay. And when it comes to requirements, nowadays it's pretty important to nail the requirements because we want to nail the issues right away up in the front. As a red team member, would you be always engaged with analyzing the business requirements along with the business analysts and the other team members so that you can ask the right questions right up front when the requirements are being devised?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, to be honest, like stepping back a second, and when I kind of touched on what is important to the business and their areas of concern, so we need kind of inputs from the whole product and development lifecycle for us to be able to identify what is valid concern, and what are things like residual risks. So for us to be able to first identify that, we need to kind of take a couple of steps back. And the first one is, utilizing frameworks, taxonomies, using them to build your own structure of how you approach vulnerability management in itself. And then formalizing, once you have that and you have those kind of frameworks that you can leverage, then you can start, going into things like threat modeling exercises, identifying those potential elements of and identifying those threats, and then obviously, formulate operationalize red teaming campaigns. So yeah, it definitely starts with a framework, a taxonomy, something between the middle where you're able to utilize things like, let's take OWASP, for example, as like a potential framework if you were going to use something like the ASVS, which is the Application Security Verification Standard. So this is a hypothetical scenario. That's when you're able to identify what the business stakeholders I keep using the word care about, but I guess in terms of like, it allows you to understand like bigger risks in your environment based on the contextual information of your ecosystem.
So let's shift gears and talk about large language models. It's an important topic today, and all of us are trying to strategize this for the better outcomes. What is your approach on incorporating security into the LLMs?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very much, to be honest, it's a very multifaceted approach. There's so many different angles that LLMs themselves both inherit from being present in things like applications and software, but then they also have their own unique and distinguishable security vulnerabilities as their own entity, right? Models are code effectively, so they also inherit things like supply chain risks. They also have their own, software development or machine learning development lifecycle. So it's really taking like a step back and understanding how the models have been built, what the models have been trained on, whether they're your own models, whether they're third party, where you're housing those models and weights and things like that. It's definitely, like I say, it's a for sure kind of multifaceted approach you need to take over.
When it comes to large language models, it's a matter of having a large amount of data corpus. And That brings in the challenge of scalability and performance related issues along with security. Now, I have been hearing discussions about scalable security in a couple of webinars that I attended, and I'm really curious about the approach that's taken for scalable security. Any specific tools or processes that needs to be done for this? These performance issues are entirely new ball game, and we have not been used to this kind of stuff.
I mean, I think there's a lot of like traditional security controls that you can really use in large language model development life cycles. So there's obviously, the recent like I'd say the incredible adoption of artificial intelligence over the past maybe year and a half has been phenomenal. But to a lot of people, it's kind of unknown. So it, I think it's worth educating yourself on understanding what these models are built of, understanding basic terminology and clearing ambiguity. And once you kind of clear that, you can realize that there are a lot of, traditional security tools that we can use. So like I use a couple of examples. So, we've got like version control, models are obviously are written in code. So you can use things like the SDLC so that you can apply things like static analysis, static or dynamic analysis, or any other method like you typically would in a software development lifecycle. You can also use data version control for actual models and weights themselves. So in terms of like the models and weights, they're the artifacts, such as code. So you can, trace areas of data coming into the models. You can then obviously look at the different benchmarks and different versions. If you have the ability to roll back, then that's also beneficial from performance related scenario. Where the models are stored, we're talking like just the same as most traditional software applications are stored. So you've got secure storage. Primarily, pretty much everyone's building in the cloud right now. So you've got AWS, GCP, cloud storage, key management systems, KMS, GKE. Those are like the kind of primary functions, and you can take all those like classic security tools that we've been using for the past 12 years and still apply those. Obviously, there's going to be some specifically to large language models, things like more on the red teaming perspective, let's say, or like if we're talking about model serialization attacks, but we even talk about like things like ML bomb now, right? Which is a machine learning bill of materials, which is taken from the abstract of software bill of materials, which we've been doing, traditionally. So there's a lot of kind of 1-2 punches that we can apply there. It's just about applying them in the right places, and like say empowering those stakeholders to be able to utilize those tools, and us as security people make sure that they're efficient for them, right? We don't want to introduce development issues, but we also just don't want to cause regression problems, false positives, and alert fatigue, because that's never a good experience.
So you had told me that you are an OWASP. I know that OWASP top 10 for LLM version 2 is being finalized. I'm quite excited about it, and I also voted for the candidates. However, don't you think narrowing down to only 10 is a bit too early in the cycle, because LLMs are still evolving? All these issues appear important to me because we don't have much customer scenarios at this point of time, because LLMs are relatively new. What is your opinion?
So yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, I'm an application security engineer. I guess in my time, I'm application security engineer and security engineering architecture. So for me, I am an OWASP child, as it were. So I've heavily utilized a lot of their frameworks. What we wanted to do is we wanted to keep the heart of OWASP and just keep our project. We want to make sure that we're delivering good content, and we want to make sure we're delivering it to the right people. So like natively integrating and adopting an organic top 10 has been the recipe for our success. When we talk about things that are outside of the top 10, I would completely agree with you, as in if I was to say like, let's take LLMs aside, and we were just talking about like application security. I wouldn't just tell you to use the OWASP top 10 for API security. We would start looking into things like the OWASP application security verification standard. If we're talking about CIS benchmarks, depending on how we're deploying and where we're storing and all that kind of thing. So within the point I'm making is that all this stuff is still relevant to our project. So, you have the OWASP top 10 for machine learning, I believe it is. But that's actually separate from our project. But within our project, because we've actually had such like fantastic success from our initial launch, we've been able to kind of fork and develop like key working groups. So some of those key working groups include things like the privacy and AI security exchange, where things that may not fall within the top 10 for LLM applications, which is the lifeblood of our target criteria. That's where we can fork off and provide those work streams. So we're kind of going like almost like a tree approach, if that makes sense. We've also, pioneered the OWASP AI Security and Privacy Guide and other forks into taxonomies and frameworks like MITRE Atlas, NIST, Risk Management Framework, as well as the Cloud Security Alliance. Personally, myself, I've also become a volunteer of the MITRE CWE AI Artificial Intelligence Working Group. It's a mouthful. And I've been working with the OWASP ASVS leaders. So these are all kind of forks where our projects are reaching out to, but we're not trying to adopt those. We're trying to make sure that we just connect the dots between those to guide people on where to go if they need this information or where we recommend this. And the project is there's a great community, has a great feedback, and if anyone's ever wanting to spin up an idea like that, like that's totally welcome. We always will be open to that kind of thing. So we're always looking to expand, and volunteer efforts are fantastic.
Yeah, there are multiple opportunities to contribute these days, right? So we have the SBOM communities, and then we have Cloud Security Alliance, there is OASP, and then there's so much, and then there's tons of opportunities to get engaged and contribute. It is pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. We've really tried to be the forefront of where someone goes when they are brand new to the field and they want to get concise information and it's relevant to LLM applications. Basically, when we actually started, our approach that LMs were only a subset of things covered up by machine learning. So given the revolutionary effect LMs have on our generation, it only made sense for us to build a top 10, which was dedicated into actually putting LMs into applications. So the beauty of that as well is that we also have a very diverse and varied skill set of people who are from academia, machine learning backgrounds, application security, traditional security operations, risk, GRC. So some people might not be in any of those buckets, but that's the beauty of where we found success with our projects and being able to develop those key working groups who can fork off and they've also produced some like fantastic material.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the pace at which the LLM models are getting generated these days. So as you might have seen, there are tons of new models of LLMs that are being released every week from OpenAI, Google, Meta, and so on.
Yeah.
From a red team perspective, how do you keep up with the speed with your red teaming efforts or testing efforts for all these new upcoming models?
That's a very good call. It's actually funny because the day before this podcast recording, we had Llama 3.1, and then today we have Mistral 2, right? So no one was expecting that. So it definitely, I can answer this with it in a few ways. The first way is that you want to employ both manual and automated red teaming techniques. Red teaming is not effective by doing either just a manual or just an automated approach. So those templates, you could not boilerplate them per such, maybe relevant in some context, but you can kind of you can repeat those approaches, especially when it comes to like automated, right? Let's say you're doing something like simple, like a model serialization scanner or machine learning bill of materials. Those are things that you can easily put into a repeatable process. So every time like a development lifecycle is kicked off, you can then embed and bake that integration you've already done to formalize those results. So you have like a templated way of being able to do that. In terms of like when it comes to manual testing, that's when we talked about those frameworks and those taxonomies, which help us align and know what we should be testing for, what we're trying to break, and what is both like within scope and what is both out of scope, so we can really be efficient and of our time and really make sure that we're actually delivering tangible content through these red teaming campaigns.
Interesting. So that brings me to the question about the metrics. Whenever there is some new LLM that is getting released, they usually say that, it's 2% better or 3% better than the existing ones, and then they give the metric numbers. I asked this question to whomever I talk to in the LLM testing space. How do
Mm.
you ascertain or make sure that these metrics are right? I mean, they can claim that it's 2% better, but from our testing perspective, do we do any specific testing to make sure that it is indeed the case?
So to be honest, benchmarking and things like that is something that is a lot smarter people than myself do. um, I kind of understand it from a client perspective, but a lot of it is involved in evaluations, as far as I'm aware. So that introduces both like a human evaluation and auto evaluation solution. Just to give you like an example, and I'm not using anything relative, it's just a hypothetical, something that I'm aware of, is using things such you can actually leverage things like machine learning algorithms to actually form like a judge model, right? So although it's not like not your only thing that should be done for benchmarking, you can have like an actual model then judge the responses and outputs from another model. But you should be during like your software testing, pretty much the same approach. You're creating these tests, which are basically algorithms, and then running those against each. So you're able to then kind of run those tests and take each results and then be able to produce visuals from that. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I asked that question because the line between the metrics, performance improvement, and testing perspective with respect to security, we have the prompts, right? So
Mm.
when it comes to the prompt, the numbers that we claim has pretty much an impact on how the security aspects perform. So you could have a response to a prompt that is measured by a metric, and that has an impact on what the prompt is really doing and what are the security implications of that particular prompt behavior. So that was the intersection I was trying to figure out. But as you said, it could be a multi-faceted approach when it comes to evolution and security. Two
Mm.
teams or two different people can verify this, but at some point of time, they got to sit together and see how this thing pans out. So
Yeah, so I just kind of actually give an example of one thing that I was doing just as my own kind of project. So I was just interested in how good like models would be acting as like CI/CD threat modeling companion, let's say. So we integrate things like a bot into our CI/CD and something like our Slack workflows or something like that. Part of when I was actually looking to do this project, I was looking at things like doing evaluations. So I wanted to identify and understand if the code that, so I built a bunch of prompts, built a data set, then I take then I run scripts to run generate to gain generations from the model from the data set. So let's say I just like load a data set from Hugging Face and throw a model and ask it to produce me code based on certain situations. Obviously, the generations I can human eval that myself, but I want to also do it in an automated way. So let's say you could then just then define and build your own custom test that take the generations from the model and then just run like a static analysis on it, right? And then you could count the number of vulnerabilities that are present in the generations, i.e., the code that the model is providing you. It's not like a one-stop shop, like that's all said and done. It's not the best approach, but just to kind of give like an idea of one way of like a custom unit test would be for like just a very specific use case. Being a security person, just one thing I thought about when using models in a positive light.
Yeah, let's shift gears and talk about the frameworks, right? So I do remember that you talked about the frameworks in your other webinars and podcasts. When it comes to frameworks, I have some pretty solid frameworks. But again, as you said, it depends on the environment and what kind of use cases that you are going through.
Mhm.
But don't you think having a solid framework like MITRE is good? I have been using that, and so I was just wondering what's your opinion on that? Maybe a quick note on that.
Yeah, so MITRE put out some great material. Still going to talk about like MITRE attack framework or even MITRE Atlas, which is more towards the machine learning development lifecycle. The one thing that I would say about adopting a framework and what I was trying to allude to earlier is that it's really, really, really important to actually utilize these frameworks, but just you should be using them, in my opinion, to build your own frameworks. That's how I would prefer to work because taking a framework is great and easy to bake and embed, but every single part and every single aspect of that framework may not be relevant. And there's a lot of contextual information. So you don't want to be introducing things like false positives or benign parts of the framework, which may hinder your ability to actually perform like vulnerability management, let's say. So there should be, in my opinion, there would be key elements of things of different parts of different frameworks that you could take away to then utilize and effectively build your own in-house.
And that makes sense. And I was thinking more of doing the threat modeling and then looking at, also the framework and work together with threat modeling and the framework and see where it goes. So that may be a good starting point. Mm, I think those are all great points, and thank you so much for your inputs on all this. It has been a very interesting discussion. Now,
Thank you.
uh, tell us about yourself. What are your hobbies and interests and things that you do out of work? Would like to know you better apart from work.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. So to be honest, like I really take my career seriously. It's something that I actually really fortunately fell into pretty much, to be honest. Ever since I had that kind of blessing, I've been extremely passionate and have like a very meticulous approach to my work. So I'm always trying to, push boundaries in application security or LM security. I like to work on my projects. I talk like a random idea I had about like a code developer kind of thing. I spent a lot of time on bug bounties, and also try and look at bolstering my adversarial techniques of if I can ever stay up to date. Also, obviously, leading the OWASP project as well. So that obviously takes is a dedicated part of work, a dedicated part of life outside of work, and I have a real passion for cutting edge tech. Um, apart from like really enjoying identifying ways of fixing like tough problems, I spend a lot of time in the community. I'm a chair on the OWASP Toronto chapter, so I'm regularly at meetups and stuff around Toronto. Volunteer at the AppSec Village in DEF CON as well. So I really like, just to be honest, I always love talking about security or models or anything, to be honest. But it's not all about tech. When I'm not glued to my keyboard, I am literally trying to get away from a computer or a laptop as far as I can as possible. I always love to seek adventure. I would say I'm a bit of a adrenaline junkie, backpacking, trails, hiking, challenging peaks, mastering boards or snowboards, paddleboards, kiteboarding. I'm always up for like anything exhilarating, to be honest. I also love traveling. I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. It was absolutely fantastic. So I really like to, um, enjoy diversity, embrace culture, and just kind of throw myself out of my comfort zone, really. And I'm also writing a book on LLM application security, which is pretty cool. So that's something pretty new to me. And yeah,
Wonderful. So you sound
thanks.
like a person who is so dedicated to security, and all the best for all your
Thank you very much.
efforts and work that you're doing. Thank you so much for appearing in our podcast and spending time with us. I wish you all the best in all your endeavors.
Thanks, Venkat. I really look forward to the rest of the great content you put out. And again, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Have a great day.
You too.